So even though last Thursday was the 24th anniversary of 9/11, it didn't really seem like to me it was the thing that was on people's minds because, you know, I was following along with this as it happened, and I was definitely shocked when it was coming out. But last Wednesday, September 10th, conservative political figure Charlie Kirk was assassinated at Utah Valley University while taking part in what he was calling his American comeback tour. So he was, put this very heavily in air quotes, debating someone who makes videos debunking his claims, has taken a good amount of time debunking them. You know, this particular person, they actually were interviewed almost immediately by Channel 5 News Channel 5 yet again, and they actually put together a whole, sort of research docket about how like this whole talking point of trans shooters doesn't make any sense because it's a statistical outlier. And as, Charlie Kirk was supposedly, asking a clarifying question, he was killed, So in the aftermath of his death, there's been the typical wave of outpourings of like thoughts and prayers, both from people on the right, but also from people like Barack Obama, lots of people in the Democratic Party, lots of different celebrities, and I think like it's really led to a lot more than what we would see typically happen with like a sort of like public shooting that happens. I mean, that very same day there was a shooting where like multiple children were injured in Colorado. There was another shooting later that week. But that's not the reason why a lot of people are talking. The reason why a lot of people are talking is because of who Charlie Kirk really was, And in people's criticism or backlash to this sort of whitewashing of Charlie Kirk's legacy, a lot of people have gotten fired and a lot of people have gotten in trouble. It's kind of ridiculous, even for saying the most benign stuff, even for literally just quoting
the stuff he
actually said. And bringing in more of that quote actually makes it worse most of the time. But, this is actually a very controversial thing to say as far as the U.S. government is concerned because, Charlie Kirk was a good friend of J.D. Vance. I think today he recently called for the doxing of people who have been criticizing Kirk. And also, I think it was Kash Patel, sorry.
Kash Patel, he wishes.
Yeah. But yeah, he and his very inept FBI crew, if you actually looked into the investigation, it was actually pretty hilarious.
Yeah, the ones and they also couldn't publish the Epstein list.
Yeah.
Kash Patel, you got to publish the Epstein list.
We're
still waiting for the Epstein list.
The funny thing about this whole investigation is when it finally came time for them to announce that they thought they had actually captured somebody, Kash was just silent the whole time because he had gone out and said they had caught somebody, retracted it, come out again, said they caught somebody, retracted it. And it's clear that this dude, it's like our nation's run by podcasters. And, it's kind of
which I was disappointed to find out he actually has a career in law enforcement before he tried to redefine it. He was a prosecutor. I think he was a public defender and a prosecutor, which is hilarious. And was involved in law enforcement before he became a podcaster and then was appointed for his political beliefs and not his effectiveness.
Yeah.
I just think it's like I think we just see how the pendulum swings based on who's the president, right?
Yeah.
Because the office of the president has such a big role that we often forget about around the creation of culture, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think people bring up the example of, like, say, George Floyd, for example, right? All these different political figures giving their thoughts and prayers for Charlie Kirk versus, like, somebody like George Floyd, for instance. Or even just the fact that Charlie Kirk himself mocked the death and murder of George Floyd when he was alive himself. And so now these fans of Charlie Kirk saying,
went on a huge Twitter tangent when this stuff started coming out.
Yeah, but how, like, just, because of the fact of his criminal record, that he doesn't deserve any type of lion status, which is ridiculous. Yeah. But again, it's not, the point is, it's just like a grift, right? It's not the point. The point is not whether or not he believes these things. The point is he does it for the purpose of making money and advancing his career,
Well,
right?
he did it for the purpose of advancing his
right,
career, 'cause
right.
he's gone now, but
gone.
his wife is definitely
Continuing the grift.
continuing that
Very much
grift.
continuing the
I mean,
grift.
there was recently, a GoFundMe that raised almost $5 million, and it was framed with the idea that it's like, oh, this is going to help the family and the kids. It's like, you're worth $12 million.
Yeah, they don't need
You don't
donations.
need $5 million from like a lot of people
Disgusting.
who probably,
Disgusting.
a lot of whom like are probably so misguided that like they might not even have a lot of that money.
Yeah, they might be broke as hell themselves, But like, going back to the thing of the administration, like, I think with the Trump administration, they really do rely on influencers. I think, the Biden administration is really big on influencers, but they're just like worse at it. Or rather, they don't necessarily have and this is the big problem with the Democratic National Committee in general, is they don't really have a thriving community of people around them, right? Like the DNC heads are all very much detached from the average person. Whereas I feel like Trump's Republican Party very much tries to base itself among like these different right-wing populist sentiments, right?
Mm-hmm.
They obviously subvert them to their monopoly capitalist lens, but they really do rely on this stuff. That's the whole fact. There's no reason for the director of the FBI, the vice president to give statements on the killing of a private individual, usually, as particularly when it's like that seen as an endorsement of their views, right? Like it's one thing, like okay, it's quite normal for people in government to give condolences toward acknowledged figures, right? So like a civil rights leader dies, you give him some figure. A long-standing politician dies or an artist dies. There's instances of the government giving like condolences from that, like acknowledging their impact on culture and society, right? So you take like a right-wing racist demagogue whose main points of the things that he's written, ways he's talked about is around pushing like right-wing race-based grifts, right? So it's the endorsement of the administration of those grifts. Of course, that's not to, and so, and then we see how, like, that whole, even like his killing is like being used as a way to like sort of drum up these same basic talking points around like mass shooters, like the trans shooter bullshit, right? That was, going back to what you were saying, Dale, that's the last thing he was literally debating. I also think it's just so crazy that you're like, you're trying to, that a guy debating that that gun deaths don't justify gun laws gets shot in the fucking neck. That is hard as fuck.
I mean, people are pointing out the supreme irony of it all, and it's right there.
It's just right there.
Despite all this, despite the fact that there's been a clear 180 from a lot of people who are calling for like, civil war and like we got to take this out on the, on the people who did this, and then suddenly the potential identity of the shooter comes out and it's like we need to pray for this young soul.
Yeah, this young soul. Jesus would have forgiven him.
But despite that, I think we're seeing like this. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you think, but this could be like another, watershed moment in U.S. history. I mean, like even in the day after his death, there were multiple HBCUs that got like death threats, like bomb threats. Yeah. This past week, there were 2 black men that were found hung in Mississippi. These things
ruled
just
as
don't
natural causes.
These things just don't happen.
Yeah, and they were like ruled as like natural causes. So
yeah, they were just absolutely ridiculous. Given
ridiculous.
One of them, his arm was broken.
Yeah, so
it's fucking disgusting.
But so it'll clearly be like used like as an impetus for different priorities of the administration, and then people broadly will that hear these dog whistles will respond spontaneously, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the interesting thing is like what kind of policies is the government going to try to use the killing of Charlie Kirk to then push forward around, say, policing, around public safety, around speech, which is so ironic. The free speech guy is most. It's not real. He was not a free speech guy because he himself opposed speech that he did not agree with.
Yeah.
But this, you see how this so-called free speech icon, as he's being like sort of lionized at present, and how that's going to be used to justify means of the party. Personally, my headcanon is that after he lost that Jubilee debate with like a bunch of young people, the Republicans decided he was worth more dead than alive. Like once they saw like his views on the internet going down, like, oh, we got to put this guy on a T-shirt.
I mean, put that guy, if anytime that dude had to face like a graduate student or like a professional,
he got owned.
There's that famous meme where like the guy on like the Young Turks is like, do you think in your heart of hearts that this is a human baby fetus? He's like, absolutely. They're like, this is a dolphin.
It's a
It's
dolphin.
a dolphin fetus.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can't really tell the difference between these two.
You can't tell the
It's like,
difference.
but you told me that it was. It's like, no, I didn't.
I
You just
did.
said it was because you assumed that you're so arrogant that you thought you could just say something like that.
But yeah, but that goes back to like what was Turning Point. Turning Point was a Koch brothers funded organization that came about during the Obama administration to sort of like attract young people to sort of early Trump populism. Actually, I think it was a Trump era AstroTurf. It was like 2016, 2015 when he started being a thing. So like early Trump. So, this is like a Koch brothers AstroTurf operation to put a young white dude in front of a bunch of, sad, skinny, pale, tattooed, pierced, purple, blue-haired liberals and just like farm clips of him just owning them over stupid shit. And so that is really that's his that was his brand. That's what he did. That's all he was known for doing, specifically for advancing right-wing talking points and getting young people sort of plugged in to like the Trump train.
Yeah. I did see this one part of an article that The Nation put out that I feel like, there's a lot of whitewashing going on with who Charlie Kirk really was. I feel like, we have to be realistic about like who he was, what he did, why he did it. I thought this really summed up kind of a lot of my feelings around this stuff as well.
So where's this article from?
It's on The Nation. So they've written a bunch of different articles, some of which I'm just like, I don't really care for this. But this particular, it's only like a couple paragraphs, but this first paragraph is like, I'll just read it. So, Charles James Kirk, 31, died on Wednesday night from a gunshot to the neck at a Utah Valley University campus event, just as he was trying to deflect a question about mass shootings by suggesting they are largely a function of gang violence. He died with a net worth of $12 million, which he made by espousing horrific and bigoted views in the name of advancing Christian nationalism. The foundation of his empire was the group he co-founded and led, Turning Point USA, which is a key youth recruitment arm of the MAGA movement. Kirk was able to launch Turning Point at the age of 18 because he received money from Tea Party member Bill Montgomery, right-wing donor Foster Friess, and his own father, also a prolific right-wing donor. He was an unrepentant racist, transphobe, homophobe, and misogynist who often wrapped his bigotry in Bible verses because there was no other way to pretend that it was morally correct. He had children, as many vile people do.
Yeah, I think that gets into it,
Yeah.
And again, I think that's not to say there's some kind of condoning of political violence in this way, specifically spontaneous political assassination. But let's be clear, like he wasn't killed as a part of like a left-wing agenda.
He wasn't just a podcaster. He wasn't just talking to people on college campuses. He wasn't a good model of how to have discussions or debate people.
But specifically, he was a part of an ideological movement. And it's so ironic that he himself wasn't killed by an enemy of his own movement, right? He was killed as a result of the political violence internal to his own movement.
Yeah.
So as we understand, that we can get new details about this.
This stuff is still constantly developing. And based on the more credible sources that we've seen, I'd say that's a fair assessment.
Right. And so, but I think the bigger issue now is that, I just think that, some people will say that I'll say that, this could be indicative of greater political violence. And I don't necessarily know about that because, it's just really too early to say. Because, again, the attempted assassination of the president was only just attempted. So, I don't think you can say there's going to be an upsurge of political violence just because there's one successful political assassination in recent memory.
I think, if anything, there's probably going to be more violence from the right against people. I think we've seen, in the wake of his death, there's been a lot of these very far right, quote unquote, vigils that have been very militant by these like different alt-right, fascist leaning groups that have come out. And we're probably going to see more of that, even though some of those people were actually opposed to his politics because he wasn't right enough for them.
But they love a martyr. All movements like martyrs. They need them. Ultimately, movements as they develop and advance, they will gain martyrs. So I think again, this movement in particular is very thirsty for a martyr since it fears having a shrinking social basis. Right. The same thing with how January 6th was treated, with different people arrested being treated as really martyrs for a particular cause. Or was it Ashley Bobbitt, the white soccer mom who charged at the cops and got shot?
She was the one that was Air Force.
Yeah, she's an Air
member,
Force
and
veteran.
now she's being commemorated by them, which is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to the administration, right? When Biden's in office, January 6th was the worst fucking thing ever. It was essentially an insurrection, which is very ridiculous to call it that. Then when Trump happens, it's just a simple misunderstanding, Anywho.
Yeah, it's definitely some interesting times we're in right now, and obviously this stuff is still developing even further. But I'll be following along with it. And
We'll have any more details.
More stuff to discuss the next time we come up. So.
Okay.